Ty Brady here with Brady Insurance Marketing in the Ty Brady Way. As a successful entrepreneur myself, I'm passionate in helping other entrepreneurs do the same as they rise from rags to riches and get inspired each week on the stories they tell here at the Ty Brady Way. Welcome back to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. And today I have the privilege of interviewing Bishop Foreman. And it's been a little bit trying to get connected always as we do these shows. But how are you?
You know what? I'm doing amazing. One, thank you for all of the great work you do, inspiring people and changing lives. I'm glad to be with you. It's a great day.
Yes. Well, everybody likes to hear a little bit about your background. And I don't think you grew up, saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. But you came from humble beginnings, if I remember correctly. And tell me a little bit about the journey on how you got to where you're at and what you're doing now. And so let's start humble beginnings. What was that like growing up?
And that's a great question. Born in Denver, raised in Memphis, Tennessee. As a kid, I was exposed to a lot of things that, many people, could take and emulate. And I just knew I was different. And I think I often say it like this, called people don't have many choices. Chosen people don't have many choices. And so for me, it wasn't a choice to do some of those things that I was seeing, whether it was, drugs and gangs and just a lifestyle that wasn't progressive and advancing. I just chose a different way. And so, I had an amazing mom who did an amazing job. And so I was kind of different. The joke is I came out of my mom's womb with a Bible and a briefcase. I had it's a spiritual concept called kings and priests. It's just spiritual and successful. And so that's just my mentality. Since I was a kid, I was entrepreneurial. I was making deals. And so even in school, I was a different kind of kid. Everybody else wanted to be friends with the other students. I was like, well, but they don't have any power. So I want to be friends with the teachers. I want to be friends with the principal. I want to be friends with the people who can influence. And so, I was just different. I was the kid who was staying back grading the papers of my classmates, versus going out and doing what they were doing. But it gave me great favor and influence. So you fast forward, start my first business when I was 12.
Wow.
I helped pioneer this program in Denver, a bank called Young Americans Bank. And so they had a special charter from the state to do financial products for students and young people. And so I did that when I was 12. It was a $300 business loan. Paid it back. But I learned so many valuable lessons. They're just in building business, starting from scratch, marketing, the whole nine. When I was 16, I took over marketing for a modeling agency. I started as a telemarketer, came in, did so well at that. At 16, 17, they promoted me. I was the director of marketing for this. They had multiple locations across the nation. It was tied to a very well-known name at that time. It was his modeling school. And then their sister company was the model management side. They had a couple of them. And so I was doing that. So I saw the power of marketing. I saw the power of, influence and getting people to see what it is that you're offering. And so, I eventually got into, the real estate finance business. Again, this is all in high school. So by the time I graduated high school, I was doing six figures,
Wow.
and producing and doing really well. And by the time I was 21, I built Denver's largest black-owned real estate finance brokerage. I did exceptionally well. And then that industry collapsed.
Yeah.
And when that industry collapsed, we had just opened a brand new office. And I would often give opportunities to people who didn't even know there was another way. Because I was always entrepreneurially industrious. I just, I never quite gelled with the concept of letting somebody else dictate my days. That never made sense to me. It just never made sense to me. And not that there's anything wrong with that. That just wasn't the right fit for me. And so, that industry collapse, learned how to pivot. And that's what my first book, The Art of Making Money was based off of, is I said, okay, all of the lessons from this valley that I'm in, I have to take these lessons and turn this valley into victory. So, I literally prayed a prayer. I said, God, if you show me how to get through this valley, I'll show everybody else how to do it. And so that was my first book. I literally wrote it 2 days back to back. We were having a blizzard in Denver. And so I had nothing else to do. So I said, let me sit down and write this book and put all these lessons into this book. And from there, learn the principles about debt freedom, building debt freedom, building a debt-free life, debt-free business, debt-free nonprofit, debt-free church. Everything we did, to me, it was important that we did it in a way where debt would never, ever be, have a hold over us or what have you. And so you fast forward to today, they give me the moniker, the People's Bishop. We built, a great ministry that reaches literally across America, around the world. Thousands of people are connected. And in addition to that, I still own a private equity firm. So mergers, acquisitions, we buy, a variety of different type of businesses and verticals, and coach and mentor a lot of executives, not a political people. So when I was coming up, I really wanted to be into law, in politics, and I got something better. I got the ability to influence those that are in those areas. And so I get to, help coach a lot of them, navigate them through a variety of things. So that's the elevator version of it.
Well, Bishop, is what's interesting is, I don't know if you knew this, but I'm currently running for city mayor. And I tell people all the time, as of lately, if I could have somebody else take the bullets I've received the last 4 weeks, I'd gladly donate to somebody's campaign. But,
Right.
The mayor didn't have anybody going against him. And there was a couple of things that came online at late. And I'm like, listen, if we keep going the direction we're going, I can sit back and continue to complain, or I can jump in and try and make a difference. And here I am. So that's kind of interesting that never think. And not only that, but your background in real estate, that's how I was before I got into the insurance business. So, and I learned how to pivot as well. So a lot of similarities, when it comes to that. So, I mean, you've got a business background, and you know what? I don't think in school, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, you learn as you go, right? No one teaches you, okay, this is what you got to do. And there's a lot of pitfalls or things that will drag you down. And one thing that you said as well is, you said, hey, I never thought somebody control my destiny, right? Or something similar to that, where you're like, I didn't think I need to have control. And I love the concept of debt free, because so many Americans today are deeply in debt, right?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think those are lessons that, you learn in the valley. And I've learned to appreciate life as a journey, not a destination. I literally when I walk in my home, the first thing I see when I walk in my home, one, there's a picture of the Roman Colosseum to remind me to be a gladiator and a warrior. But the second thing I look at is a little picture that says, "In life is a journey, not a destination." And in that journey, all of those lessons that we learn, for example, debt freedom, I was doing so well that I just was, not really paying attention to what I was spending and what I was doing. I remember I had investment properties where I was subsidizing the rent, and then didn't really pay attention, because I just didn't even pay attention. I was like, yeah, that's a good number, we'll go with it, right? And then I looked back, I'm like, oh my God, these people are underpaying me. It was my fault, but I learned a valuable lesson that, you can't receive what you don't respect. And so I had to learn to respect money as a resource, not as my source, but as a resource. And so I learned those lessons, and I learned the value of having nothing to prove to anybody. I think a lot of the reason people are in debt is because they feel like they've got something to prove to themselves, their parents, where they went to school, their ex, whatever. I learned, you know what, have nothing to prove to anybody, but be able, if you live like nobody else, you'll be able to live like nobody else. And so all of those lessons came from that valley, and they literally still stick with me to this day. I mean, every decision that I make through the matrix. A lot of those lessons learned in that valley. And I was grateful to go through that valley at that stage of my life, to learn those lessons, so that I could I always wanted to build a life where I worked because I wanted to, not because I had to. And I can say that I've done that.
I believe everybody has the capability of finding a niche or a vertical where they can have that career where they don't work a day in their life. And the thing is, I think people give up before they have the breakthrough.
So true. Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
go ahead.
And I was just going to say that, if you get two options, you break down or you break through. And the circumstances around both are the same. The choice, though, becomes ours. Do I break through this, or do I break down from this? And what I love about it is, even when because we all have human moments, even in that breakdown, it's never too late. I love the word you used earlier, to pivot and turn it into a breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too late. You still got a post. There's still a plan.
Yes. If anybody could get anything from this simple podcast show, is that they have the capability and they just have to keep going. So from there, something my mom said when I was a kid is you have to have a relationship with God. She's like, I don't care where you go to church, but you have to have a relationship. And she would always say you have to have a spiritual, mental, physical, all of those things, social aspect of your life. You have to have those quadrants in your life. So when did you finally decide, hey, this is the direction I'm going and impacting lives in a spiritual way?
Oh, great question. You know what? It goes back to but I mentioned kind of coming out with a Bible and a briefcase. I got into ministry through music. And so I was a drummer. I wasn't a very good drummer, if you want the truth. You're supposed to keep the beat. Sometimes the beat would be fast. Sometimes they slow it down. Like I wasn't very good. But I'll tell you this. I started playing drums because I was a friend of mine, my best friend at the time. He and I were very competitive with one another. So, tit for tat. I do something, he do something. He do something, I do something. That's why our friendship works. So he was into music. He could play and sing and do a bunch of different things. And, I was like, well, I tried saxophone, didn't like it. Tried trombone, didn't like it. Tried trumpet, didn't like it. He got a drum set one Christmas. So I went home and said, well, he got a drum set. I want a drum set too. Like, you can't even play. I said, yep, but I'll learn how to play. They said, like you did the sax and like you did the trombone and all of that. I said, yep, I'm going to do it. But I did. And I literally would study the drummer at church. I just studied what he did and I listened to tapes and I taught myself how to play and I got very good. And I eventually was inducted years later into the Colorado Gospel Music Hall of Fame. Didn't even know we had one until they put me in it. And for music and producing and choirs and all of that. And but that's how I got into it. And I think for me, I always had a connectivity to God. I didn't know that I would also turn that connectivity into a major part of the purpose that I had in life. Like, I became an associate. So I was always in ministry since 12, same time I started my first business. And became an associate pastor at 19. So I got into a very, 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 very young, but I'm grateful for that because I was able to give and still, I'm not super old now, but able to give a lot of my life and a lot of my strength to seeing the lives of other people changed. And so, make no mistake, what I do for God and my connectivity to God are two totally different things. But it certainly makes it easy when both, that relationship as well as my purpose, those two things coincide with one another.
There's so many similarities in an entrepreneur, an influencer and a relationship with God. And everybody, I believe, has that part in them to do better and be better. And I often have conversations with my wife and say, my job is to raise good humans, right? Have them be good people and be good members of society, right?
Yep.
And so you get into gospel music, and then how does it scale from there? Like, how does that transition go? I mean, you've done a lot of great things. I mean, similarities, like I started my first business when I was 8. My mom used to say, hey, I'll provide a roof over your head. I'll provide food in your mouth, but any extra or additional things you got to provide for yourself. And I tell people all the time, I started doing my laundry when I was 8. She's like, you want clean clothes? You do it yourself. I mean, I had 8 sisters, 2 brothers. So there wasn't a lot of bandwidth. My mom was great and always made sure I had those 2 things. But how did that scale from there?
Oh, good question. So one of the greatest things that I think my mom ever did for me, and I think it's such a powerful parenting lesson, worked for you, worked for me, is get out of my way. And what I mean by that, not in a dismissive, negative way. She gave me the freedom to, I think, men, there's a natural, not just men, but entrepreneurs, business, anybody that's going to lead or do something. There's a natural lion in you, right? There's a natural hunger and desire in you. And sometimes a mom can mean well, but in over parenting and I'll make up a word, over momming, you can sometimes mom the fighter out of a person. So they don't know how to fight. They don't know how to survive. They don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to figure anything out. They don't know how to do life. And I think a lot of what we're seeing in culture today is from an over-parented generation and over-parented people where they don't know how to survive anything. They're very smart, very intellectual, have greatest resources more so now than ever, but because they were over-parented, they can't figure anything out. And so the moment a bully shows up, they don't know what to do. The moment a challenge shows up, they don't know what to do. They break down instead of break through. And one of the greatest things she did was she just let me be me. I was the type of kid where I'll be honest about it. I was signing my own permission slips. I was, I know, I don't advise anybody else doing that, but I would just let her know, oh yeah, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing this. I'm doing that. When I turned 16, I wanted a car. And so I, had business, built the money, got it. I literally called her one day at work and said, okay, this is what I need you to do. We're going to go to this dealer. Here's the deal. Here's the car. I've checked it out. I already ordered the used car inspection. She said, how did you do all of this? This is just what I did. I knew what I wanted and I went after it. And she did a great job of making sure I had all the tools that I needed, but she didn't. I love what you just said. She didn't do it for me. And I think being the oldest too, I was the oldest, of my brother and sister. And so that comes with another level of responsibility. And I'll just throw this in there too. The facts are, I grew up in have you ever seen the movie What's Love Got to Do with It, with the story of Ike and Tina Turner?
Probably, maybe a while ago. Probably didn't watch it, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's like from 93, 94. It's an older movie. It's not quite exactly historically accurate, but I referenced the movie because my stepfather was like all of the worst characteristics you could think of. And Ike Turner, a womanizer, abuser, all of those things. That's what I saw. So in the house, I am creating a man that I didn't see and becoming a man that I didn't behold. And so I learned so much, even when it speaks to resilience and all those things, from seeing my mom as an overcomer and doing all of these great things, but then also seeing the tumultuous nature of what it was to be in the house with a man that, had his own challenges and was abusive and a womanizer and on drugs and all those things, and deciding to myself, that's not the man I want to be. I want to be something different than what I saw.
Oh, so true. You look at life, and life is experiences. When you talk about overparenting, I sometimes say, it's soft parenting or helicopter parent where they don't let their kids speak. I mean, I've gone to a restaurant and kids can't even order their own meal, right? And I'm like, the kids have to experience life. How do you coach somebody through that mental block?
Oh, great question. I think one, it's in recognizing where the deficits are. I don't think you can ever successfully, overcome anything until you face the facts and then determine how to move forward. And I think a lot of times because we've gotten so good at glazing over things, not calling a thing, that what happens is you can never confront the Goliath you won't admit is there. Being honest about what it is. Is this fear? Is this fear of rejection? And what's rooted with the root of this fear? Like, do you fear it because you have a lack of information? Do you fear it because of rejection? Is it a telephobia? Do you not feel good enough? Like, let's deal with the root, because if we fix root, we can always change fruit. We live in a culture, though, that says paint the fruit and ignore the root. So consequently, people can have great moments, but it's not actually their pattern. And the pattern, what you just said, life is experience. The pattern is who a person really is. You can have a great moment, but that not be who you really are. You can have a horrible moment and that not be really who you are. It's the pattern. And I think to get to the pattern, you got to dig down to the root. Like, why am I experiencing this? And it really does take, I think, a third party coaching, therapy, these types of things, to say, let's peel the layers off, because we're really good at lying to ourselves and telling ourselves it's one thing when it's really something else.
Yeah, you get to that root cause, and the fastest way to change somebody is their habits and behavior. You do that
Right.
and get to the root cause. But oftentimes you use the word glaze over. They just keep going through the motions and not deal with the root cause. And, that's how a plant grows. You've got to plant a seed and it grows from the root, and then you blossoms and has fruit. So if you can't get the nourishment at the base of that root, it dies.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think the other thing, I love what you said about that from roots, is root work is dirty work.
Yes.
Like, you got to dig up the soil. It's dirty. It's not, it's not the pretty plant. It's not just watering it. It's dirty work. And I think as much as we're willing to get dirty determines as far as we're able to move forward. Do the dirty work, have the conversations that require you to confront some of the things from your past. I had to, I've lost, now it's probably about 120, 25 pounds now that I've lost. When I began to shed the weight, and I carried it like a middle linebacker. So most people couldn't really tell because it's just the way that I've been. But I knew that I didn't like where my health was, and I didn't like my energy levels. And so I took the steps necessary to change it. And most of it was diet. As I shed that weight, I discovered that there was some bitterness that I had. And my body kept the score. The bitterness was, just in some things that had happened, and sometimes you don't even know what's going on. And as I began to look at the root, I said, okay, the root of all of this is something totally unrelated to the fruit of all of this, but this is dirty work. This requires you being vulnerable. It requires you having conversations with yourself. This requires you confronting emotional things and traumatic things and dramatic things that we often are like, you know what, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to talk about it. And I learned, you know what, anything that I avoid controls me. So I can't avoid anything. I have to confront it all.
You've learned that over time, though, and that's so true in life, is that you've got to everybody has trauma, right? Everybody has a past. I could talk about how I was bullied as I was a kid. My teacher said I'd mount to do nothing. I'd be in jail, or, whatever they would say. And part of it is I have a learning disability and I'm dyslexic, and I can't sound out the words. And at the time when growing up as a kid with ADHD and dyslexia, they didn't really know what that was. And I still say it's undiagnosed because I don't want to go to a doctor and be like, hey, I don't like labels, right? So I don't want to be labeled as this, but I've fought through a lot of those things. And you know what? I make fun of it because it's hard for me to learn a language, and I had to learn to sight read. So I remember sitting down with my dad, and my dad's like, well, if you can't sound this out and hear the vowels, just memorize it. And I got really good at memorizing. People are like, Ty, you've got a phenomenal memory. But, that's a trait that I've been blessed with because of my weakness, right? And if you look at scripture, God says he'll make weak things strong, and you just got to persevere and not give up, because we are all products of our past.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that, the scripture you mentioned, that's Joel 3:10. It says this, let the weak say I'm strong. So it's not even denying that there's an issue. It's just denying that issue has to define me. He says, just speak something different that you want to see versus the reality that you do see. Like, it's the divine delusion of faith is what I call it. I see that that's there. I'm just deciding that can't stop me.
Correct. I mean, and it was good to confront that. When you learn now that there's a lot of people that deal with the same issue, and they can let it control them, or they can make a better situation of who they are and what they have in them. And it's so true. So when you got to how do I say this? When you got to the top, and I deal with this a lot when I talk to leaders in industries, they say it's pretty lonely at the top. Have you found that to be the case? Like, leaders are hard to find. People like you are hard to find, but they're out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say this, it can be lonely at the top. I think the expectation that most people have for success and leadership and business and whatever, however they define success, is that it's going to be like on social media. And I think the reality is you have to pose to post. So all those are poses. And there's another word for pose, which means it's not necessarily the reality. The higher you go, the thinner the air. The thinner the air, everybody can't dwell up there. And so for me, I learned that the best thing you could do as you are ascending and succeeding in anything is recognize that at certain levels, certain people are going to drop off. There is this belief that there's a snake line where at a certain point, snakes can't survive or live beyond that level as you continue to ascend mountains. And I think the same is true in life, is that sometimes the people that were with you at one level simply cannot ascend and transcend to the next layer and level of life. And either you try to take them somewhere they can't survive, or you stay below down there with them. And those are the choices. So I learned, keep my circle tight, keep my circle right. So early on, one of the greatest ways of therapy for me was to find other people who were similar. Referencing scripture, there's a scripture that says iron sharpens iron. Well, aluminum doesn't sharpen iron. In fact, the iron's going to cut through the aluminum. And sometimes the challenge people have why they feel lonely is they're surrounding themselves with a lesser metal. And when you're surrounding yourself with a lesser metal, you agitate them. You don't inspire them. There's always conflict. There's not a complementing of one another. So I found people who could be around me. I could clap for their success. They clap for my success. And I can count on one hand how many people that is. But the reality is those relationships are therapeutic. Those relationships are transparent. those relationships are very add great value to me. And I'll be honest, every time I try to add someone to that group that's not really that level of metal, doesn't demean them as a person. It just means they're not my type of iron. And if they're not my type of iron, that's okay. They just can't be in that circle. So it can be lonely, but this is why I encourage everybody, get you some people that can be in that space and place with you who, and here's the key, who don't want to be you. They want to see you win.
Mm.
Many times we surround ourselves with people who want to be us, and that's where all the conflict comes from. That's where all of the sly comments come from. That's where all of the back and forth and the difficulty and the overcomplicating of things that should be simple. You clap for them, they don't clap for you. I paid attention to those things. I always look at a room, and when somebody's clapping for me, I always look not to see who's clapping, but to see who's not clapping, because I just learned a lot. So it can be lonely, but I encourage everybody, like, don't do this journey to your life and business and success and entrepreneurship, whatever it is you're doing. Don't do it alone, but also don't expect to have a big crowd around you either.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can count on my hand, on one hand, basically, those people that I would reach out to that have been great mentors over the years. And going back to your point where, iron sharpens iron, I refer to analogy like a rocket booster. Like if you're going to the moon, when you're taking a rocket ship to the moon, those boosters fall off, right? They don't go all the way to the moon, but they still help in that journey and that destination to the moon to get you where you want to go, if that's your end goal. One thing I think too is in setting goals, people sell themselves short, and
Yep.
they need to look at the bigger picture. I think people are so much in fight or flight or survival mode that they don't look at, okay, if I do this, we go back to the analogy of a root, it's dirty work. The fruit is going to bear itself if you do the work, but it takes time.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I love what you said about the survival mode, because you can literally be a millionaire and still be in survival mode.
Yes.
And I think sometimes people think money will fix it, and money just amplifies what's present. It doesn't fix anything. And so, because it just creates a new set of issues. And so now let me be clear. It makes life easier because it gives you options. But it does not necessarily fix the mentality. And so I could speak to that, because after going through the valley I mentioned earlier, coming out of that and then succeeding in a very, very big way, and continuing to do that. Last year was a triple digit growth year. And so continuing to do that in every way, shape, form, or fashion, I had to step back, and here's another one of those root work conversations. I had to realize there are still areas where I am thinking in survival mode. There's still areas where I'm thinking this is, that summer, and I've got two $20 Terrell Davis, the football player who's now at the Hall of Fame, autograph bill from when I saw him at Landry's one day as a kid. And, it is one of those moments where you're in transition. What's next? What's going to happen? So do I eat or not? And I got to take that $20 Terrell Davis bill, and I got to get me a pizza because I got to eat, right? And I recognize that there were moments where you can still have great success, however you measure that, and still be in that fight or flight mentality, which is one of those things that, again, it's just part of your journey to step back and say, we're not in that place anymore. You're not in that environment anymore, and begin to see yourself thriving. It's not arrogant to be aware of where you're at.
Correct. And one thing that I've done a lot better of over time is measuring. Sometimes you can measure like data, right? But looking at the data and then realizing where I carry, like my wife gives me a hard time because I've got sunglasses I've had for 20 years. And she's like, why don't you get you a new pair? Or I have a car that I've driven for 20 years. But, back in the day, I think it comes back from my childhood because a car to me was my freedom. And I was like, a lot like you, 16, bought a car, and that was my freedom. And I went out. And now today's days and age, you can't even seems like kids don't even want to drive, or they just Uber everywhere. And I'm just like, man, what happened to getting out and experiencing life?
Yep. Yep. So true. I think that's such a good point. And back to the whole point of the culture, and I think the over parenting, and I think not even just the over parenting, but the change in culture and society, where I think a lot of what happens in culture is training people to be consumers dependent upon somebody else versus versus a producer where, you are in control. And I think that's why I love what you're doing, and because it's giving people that power back, to recognize that, all right, I don't have to do that. And small, subtle things like that. I'll be honest with you. I have only taken an Uber or Lyft twice, and that's only because I had a flat tire. So, and nothing against Uber, Lyft, nothing against any one of them or any of that. For me, even when I travel and I speak, people, we'll send a car. Nope. I'm going to do my own car, my own rental car, because when I want to go somewhere, I want to be able to go there. When I want to get up at 11:30 and go on a drive and see the city that I'm speaking in, or see this, whatever, I want to do that. Whatever it is that I'm doing, because it goes back to, once you experience freedom, anything else is bondage.
Oh, wow, that's deep. That gave me chills.
Yeah.
And when I help people become financially free. I talk about my 4Fs: family, faith, financial freedom, free time. And when people experience that, I don't think they will ever go back, even if they have to pivot or transition to something else. Man, we're running short on time. Bishop Foreman, I appreciate you being on the show. Any last thoughts you'd like to leave with the audience? And I know there's lots of great takeaways, and we could talk for days, that you'd like to leave.
Yeah, again, let me thank you for this opportunity to speak and connect with you and your audience, and thank you for what you do. I would say this to every person. If there's one thing that I've always seen myself as, is a curse breaker. And a curse, most people, when they hear that word, they think of witches and warlocks and demons and devils and black cauldrons. No, a curse means an empowerment to fail. And I've always seen myself as that curse breaker. And one of my books, called Sins of the Fathers, Breaking Generational Curses, I was that. You heard me talk about my stepfather. I'm the first in my bloodline to, achieve certain educational achievement, certain financial achievement. I'm the first in my bloodline to do anything like what I'm doing. And when you're the first, when you're the pioneer, and you don't necessarily have a playbook to live by, this is why those F's you just mentioned are so important. Faith and all that to navigate you through. And I just say to everyone, the takeaway is, you're the curse breaker. You're the one that's going to interrupt the dysfunction. You're the one that's going to break the mold, beat the statistics, cross the line, break the boundary. And in doing that, sometimes you just need to know you're not alone. You're not the only one. And I say that to every person that's listening right now. You're not the only one. You're not alone. You're the curse breaker. You're the Joseph of your family. Joseph's brothers threw him in a pit, but he was the one that 20 years later they'd need. Everything that's happened into your life is going to work together for your good, because you're a curse breaker. And it may not seem like it, may not feel like it, but that's exactly the journey that you're on. So keep breaking curses.
Wow, so powerful. Obviously they're going to see, they can connect with you on social media, go out and grab your books on Amazon. As always, share, like, and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. As always, share, like, and subscribe. Go to Instagram at ty.r.brady. And as always, love hearing from you. And let me know what you want to learn on the show, or what you'd like me to bring up on the show. Thanks.
You can find the Ty Brady Way on Instagram as well as Facebook. To stay connected with giveaways and Ty himself, go ahead and follow at ty.r.brady on Instagram as well as Facebook. This podcast was recorded, edited, and produced by Whitney Face Media Marketing. And the theme music is an excerpt from Hot Chicken of the Woods by Isaac Joel.